Yes, hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty Show in what feels like an absolute eternity since we've been here, but we're both back. Mags is not quite back from his honeymoon. I hope he's having an absolute amazing time. But Ali and James are here tonight. And James, we have got some football coming up very soon. See, training camp, the videos are going around X or Twitter, whatever you call it, about some of these rookies, some of these players making some decent catches. It's always a really fun time of year to check the timeline, see what's going on, see who's running with the ones, with the twos, and unfortunately some of the injuries as well. But with that, there has been obviously quite a bit of news and quite relevant to you, James, a Commanders fan. This is the host question to kick off the show. When is Terry McLaurin going to get a new deal, James? Because it must be painful to see Courtland Sutton, a player that many people say Terry McLaurin is a better wide receiver than Courtland Sutton. For them to see him get a 4-year, $92 million deal. I believe they're the same age, so they're probably looking at roughly similar contract. But yeah, James, is it going to happen? Have you got any concerns about Terry McLaurin heading into this year, or do you think that it will naturally unfold and he'll sign a new deal soon?
I think we spoke about this, it was around a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, and I was way more blasé about it then than I am now, that's for sure. I still think this is the kind of thing that gets done, but yeah, obviously every day that passes, it becomes more of a concern. As a fan of the Commanders and as a fan of Terry McLaurin, as a sort of dynasty asset as well, and Jaden Daniels, because obviously he doesn't really have a lot else there. Obviously Deebo Samuel now, but yeah, the rest of that wide receiver room isn't really sort of lighting things up for you. It's one of those things where I can understand what the Commanders, their stance is because of McLaurin's age. He's 30. Rumors as of yesterday are he wants more money than DK Metcalf, and I can understand him wanting more money than DK Metcalf from his perspective as well, because DK Metcalf shouldn't be being paid as a top 4 wide receiver in the league. If we look at the sort of the company above him and just below him, he doesn't fit. His sort of stands out. So yeah, I can understand the Commanders not wanting to commit that kind of money to someone who's 30, because by the time his contract's up in 3 years, he's not going to be necessarily worth that money. But this is a kind of a unique situation for anyone kind of in this situation, because Terry McLaurin has had to put up with so much as a player for the Commanders for the last however many years he's been there, and he's been a role model for the team throughout, and he's been sort of the only standout player. Like, if a couple of years ago, if you were buying a Commanders jersey, there's no other candidates really that you're going to have on the back of the jersey. So that kind of just shows you, he's been the face of the franchise, as a wide receiver for the last few years. And at the end of the day, you just have to get it done, whatever it takes. Pay the man his money. That you're still on a rookie, you've got a quarterback on a rookie deal. So as long as it's not going to be an issue for you when it comes to paying Jaden Daniels, just get it out of the way. I know it's a lot of money for someone of that age, and we're talking about him being paid as a top 3 wide receiver in the league, and that doesn't quite fit his value. But to the franchise, that is almost perfectly does fit his value. So it just has to get done. I hope, to answer your initial question, when is he getting a new deal? I hope the answer is tomorrow. Well, I hope the answer is today. I have no idea if it will happen. It just doesn't feel like the kind of situation where it doesn't get done because of, I said, the history of Terry McLaurin, the rest of the players that the Commanders have got. It just feels like it has to happen. And I think the positive, at least, he's sort of showing up to camp now. He's holding in instead of holding out. If he was still holding out, I guess, that's just another extra worry. But yeah, I don't know when. Hopefully tomorrow, hopefully today, whenever it gets done, it gets done. As long as it's done before the season starts, obviously, ideally sooner rather than later. It just feels like it has to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Commanders clearly, after what, such an impressive surprising season in 2024, that securely in the Super Bowl window with Jaden Daniels on that rookie deal, I think it'd be absolutely just bonkers to not pay him, and especially with the salary, the cap goes up so much every single year that in a couple of years' time, I still think he's got plenty of juice left, and it will look like a contract that's not big. These players are signing these big deals, but then they're just every single year being overtaken by the next guy and the next guy. So yeah, hopefully it gets done. Interesting sort of dynasty asset when they reach. There's quite a few players that are reaching that sort of 28, 29, 30, 31 age, where it's just so interesting to what people do with these wide receivers, because in the past it's been, I just don't want to touch these, sell them before they get to 29, but they seem to be getting contracts later and later into their NFL career and going on a bit longer. So I do think there's plenty of juice left with Terry McLaurin. If there's anybody nervous about him not getting a new deal, signing that new deal just yet, I think there's definitely a decent buy opportunity, because the next 2 years, when he's the main man for Jane Daniels, is going to be top 12 sort of wide receiver for the next couple of years, and for the prices that people are asking for him, it's probably worth doing it. But yeah, we just want to see him sign, and he can sign, and we can have that sexy stack with Jane Daniels. But hopefully that's the positive news, because we're going to talk about some not so positive news. And this is on the back of our last show, which was our flag plants. Obviously, you want to go back and check that out, because we are 100% right. The record is sublime. These are the players that we were putting our flag down on 2025 season. And tonight we're going to explore the players that we're unplanting our flag on, that we don't think warrant their ADP or perhaps their value, their ranking right now in Dynasty. So there's a selection of players at all different positions. So James, we're going to kick it off with you, and you're going to talk about a wide receiver from a place that I regularly call the wide receiver graveyard, which is the Baltimore Ravens. So who have you got?
Yeah, this isn't the pick that necessarily you feel good or all that confident about saying, but yeah, I'm going to go for Zay Flowers. I know that'll be an unpopular name for a lot of people in terms of unplanting a flag from, because of the team he plays for, and because of how good they are, how good the quarterback is. But as you kind of alluded to there, this isn't an offense that you really want to target wide receivers from. You can say he's the best wide receiver or even the best pass catcher on this offense, but that doesn't necessarily translate to fantasy production. And I just feel like the way that we value Zay Flowers is, he's the top wide receiver on that team. But some offenses can maintain multiple wide receivers and some can't. And the Ravens offense just isn't one that is friendly to wide receivers. And I mean, this isn't a general point. I don't dislike Zay Flowers. I don't like his value. So I've looked at Keep Trade Cart, he's wide receiver 27. And I've looked at the Fantasy Pros consensus redraft ranking, and he's wide receiver 25. I'm not sure why you would have him higher for redraft than you would Dynasty, but that is what it is. Obviously, it's different people doing the rankings or whatever. But then if you compare that with his points that he scored in the last 2 seasons in the NFL, he was wide receiver 32 in points per game in his rookie year, and then he was wide receiver 33 in points per game last year. Now, obviously, he's a young player. There's room for progression. But for me, it just feels like he's been ranked or valued a little bit too close to his ceiling, or maybe even above it if we look at what he's produced in the past. And as I've mentioned, it's a great offense. We want pieces of this offense, but really we want Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And obviously we can have a little look at the tight ends as well, because tight ends there just aren't as many of value out there. So maybe the passing game isn't what we want to target in this offense, but you don't need as much volume as a tight end to be fantasy relevant. So I just don't see how, with the way this offense functions, that Flowers is going to be consistent enough to be ranked as nearly a wide receiver 2, or valued nearly that high. Like, how confident are you starting Zay Flowers as your wide receiver 2 in your Dynasty team? I don't think you are. It's fine if he's a wide receiver 3 or it's a flex spot for you, but he's almost valued as a wide receiver 2, and that's just too much. I think there's talk today that they're going to be extending Isaiah Likely. There was potential rumours that Mark Andrews would be moving on this year. That hasn't happened. And then they've extended Bateman and signed DeAndre Hopkins. So it just doesn't feel like there's going to be any more volume for Flowers this year unless the Ravens defense took a nosedive, and I don't see that happening. So we're relying on Flowers becoming much more efficient, scoring a load more touchdowns, to be sort of consistent for us each week. And he's not going to score more touchdowns because Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to score the touchdowns. And I don't see that there's enough of a need for the offense to change, because it's so good already that they're not going to change and start targeting their wide receivers more, because like they don't need to. It's already one of the best offenses in the league. So yeah, it's not a I hate Zay Flowers take. It's a I hate Zay Flowers' value take, and I'm not confident with him as a borderline wide receiver too. So yeah, I'll unplant my flag on Zay Flowers for this year, and we can revisit it next year when maybe some of those players have moved on and there's sort of more targets to go around.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Again, I absolutely want pieces of the Baltimore Ravens offense because it's top 5 in the NFL. But I think you've also hit the nail on the head, the fact that the defense is also top 5, at worst going to be top 10 in the NFL. We've got some absolute beasts. So they're just not going to be in shootouts. Lamar Jackson absolutely can sling it with the best. I think we're seeing that the last couple of years, that his passing has been so much better. He's one of the top 10, passing quarterbacks in the NFL. That's just not even thinking about his legs. So he absolutely can do it. But as you mentioned, I just don't see him, having a massive gap between him, Rashad Bateman, DeAndre Hopkins. We've seen today that Lamar Jackson and DeAndre Hopkins has been worked on their chemistry. I think he could be a big piece. Rashad Bateman, as you mentioned, extended him. He was a first-round pick as well, wasn't he? And someone that hasn't hit the heights. But if you were to tell me that he doesn't finish much further behind Zay Flowers in points per game, fantasy points this season, then I'll quite believe it, because he seems to be the guy that they go to for the touchdowns. And Zay Flowers is sort of the underneath guy. And I just think, just thinking back, I mean, I don't personally own any shares of Zay Flowers, I don't think, in my Dynasty portfolio, but this doesn't, in the back of my mind, I can't remember like a massive game from Zay Flowers. Like, sometimes you get like a big explosion where someone like Jameson Williams can have a really big game, someone like that. Mike Evans, 4 touchdowns in a game. It's Zay Flowers doesn't really have that ability, so he's not someone that I really strive to go out there and buy. I think wide receiver 27 is, I agree. I think approaching back end wide receiver 2 is probably where his ceiling is right now. I like to definitely visualize ceiling when it comes to players in Dynasty, and I'll certainly talk about that with my next guy. And yeah, I think Zay Flowers is probably approaching it. It's just the offense can, if they want to, go to Zay Flowers, but it's just not going to be enough.
It's a good enough player that he could command extra volume, and then this looks like a terrible take. But it just doesn't see that happening in this offense in the way it's structured at the moment. I think he's a really good NFL wide receiver. He will be really good for the Ravens for however long he's there. But that doesn't mean that his fantasy value is correct.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And as you mentioned, Andrews is still there. I think he could easily get double-digit touchdowns for this season. I think it's possibly he's going to be his last season, and likely he's going to take that over. But yeah, there's too many mouths to feed on an offense that doesn't want to pass to the wide receivers first, go via the running game. So yeah, absolutely on board with that first pick, James. And I'm going to go for certainly a unique player that's now coming into the NFL in Travis Hunter, the number 2 pick in the draft from this year. And again, it's not, I mean, I've been actively tweeting about how much I really like Travis Hunter, and was actually, taking him in places, it was between him and Cam Ward a lot of times in rookie drafts in the first round. And, I was hammering Travis Hunter. It's just the cost to draft him and the cost to acquire him via a trade right now is far too high. He's such a special talent. And I listened to a lot of NFL draft analysts before the draft talk about the prospects, and he was number 1 across the board in most people's top 10, top 50, top 100. He's just such a special talent. The fact that he can play both positions, but I think that's exactly that. The fact that he can play both positions is why he was drafted 2nd overall to the Jags, and they were so aggressive, in getting him, because he fits their sort of roster, being able to play defense and offense. Traded away their first round pick next year, plus some more picks to get him. But we've, finally heard sort of what his intended usage is going to look like more from Liam Cohen recently. I think it was last week, and he mentioned the word flip-flop between offense and defense, which is, to me, not surprising whatsoever. A lot of the talk up until now has been how he'd probably be mostly used on offense, but I think that he's now going to start working in the more defense packages as well. So, yeah, where he's going in Dynasty right now, which is wide receiver 16 on Keep Trade Cut, is just, I cannot get on board with. He's a light above the likes of T. Higgins, Rashee Rice. Obviously, there's controversy about him right now, but he's, as a Dynasty asset, he's way above Travis Hunter for me. Emeka Egbuka, Devonta Smith, Rome Odunze, Xavier Worthy, Jalen Waddle. These are all guys that I'd have above Travis Hunter. And I just think that, he's just hyped up far too much. And I think that people will be disappointed because he's not always going to be on offense when they want him to. I think this passing offense runs through, obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. and what he was able to do in his rookie year, albeit not with Trevor Lawrence. But looking at Trevor Lawrence's stats since he entered the league, obviously he's not been or lived up to the hype so far, but he's actually been number one in the NFL in percentage of throwing to his first read, which to me, I don't think that's going to change. I think Liam Cohen has had that as well with Baker Mayfield this year. And I think that's absolutely going to be Brian Thomas Jr. And I think Travis Hunter is going to be effective. I think he's going to be good. He's obviously a very, very talented wide receiver. But I do think the fact that he's going to be a part-time wide receiver means I cannot have him ahead of the likes of T. Higgins, who, you could almost have him as wide receiver one on your team. He's so productive in the offense. The same with Rashee Rice, people like that. I just can't have it. So at wide receiver 16, I think because he's not going to be full-time wide receiver, I think that he's approaching his ceiling. And so I'd probably like to get off him right now and certainly not try and acquire him because the cost is far too high.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you've said. It's one of those where I'm not necessarily changing my view on Travis Hunter based on what's happened in the last week or two, though, because I kind of already had that kind of feeling. I actually don't think I've got any shares. So in sort of 12 to 15 rookie drafts, I didn't manage to get any. Not because I completely avoided him. It was just I wasn't going to take him sort of at the value that I needed to, and everyone else was sort of more willing to take that risk. I think, I'd be quite happy to have a couple of shares and sort of to see if he does kind of hit that ceiling, like you said. But like you said, I'm more looking at him as a wide receiver 2, right at the back end of that wide receiver 2 valuation. He's certainly not. You can't be confident in him being sort of wide receiver 16 value or whatever it is at the moment, like you said. So I can't disagree, and I don't think Mags disagreed either because he also picked him as his unplant, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, he did. He picked him way before I picked him, before Mags went away. But I think it's the same feeling with Mags. We've not had a direct conversation about why he picked Travis Hunter, but I get the gist that he's also feeling that sort of part-time wide receiver role. The fact that people were taking him ahead of Ted McMillan, and we've all been big Ted McMillan fans, and we said we'd pick him ahead of him. That can't be having any of that. And I think Mags is on board with that. So he was the first pick that Mags had was Travis Hunter in that wide receiver 16 ranking. And we're going to go with it because Mags is a very smart guy. I've picked him. So, I mean, it can only mean you've got to unplant your flag on Travis Hunter, the unicorn. So we'll move on to the running back position, James, and back to you for a guy that had an absolute tear to finish the season last year, but you're thinking perhaps he doesn't quite show that form entering 2025.
Yeah, exactly. And this is another player where this is more about his surroundings, his team, for the wrong reasons. This is Jonathan Taylor. So obviously in my previous pick, Zay Flowers, I was saying that the offense is too good, that they don't need to sort of look to Zay Flowers that often. And I think this is kind of the opposite, where I just really cannot trust anyone in this offense this year. And certainly not a running back where I just can't. With running backs, you want to see them scoring touchdowns regularly, and unless he's going to be popping off a 60-yard run, how many touchdowns is he possibly going to be able to score? You mentioned that he was on an absolute tear in the fantasy playoffs at the end of the season. So he scored 30% of his fantasy points from last season in week 16 and 17. I'll say that I got that stat from Tom Strachan, Fantasy Sanctuary at the Fantasy Sanctuary meetup about a month and a half ago. Tom did a quiz, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but it might have been what percentage of Jonathan Taylor's points did he score or whatever. 30%. He's got like a 38-point game and a 27-point game or something like that. So obviously, I guess that shows you that he can do it in this offense. But the fact that was, those 2 weeks are 30% of his whole points throughout the season. I don't think he missed any time injured either. Maybe it might have been a game. So just the reliability of it, I just can't see whoever's going to be the quarterback. Obviously, we haven't even spoken about this, but it could be Anthony Richardson, it could be Daniel Jones. I don't know who we would even prefer if we're talking about Jonathan Taylor. You maybe would say Daniel Jones because of the dump offs and check downs or whatever. What does that mean? Like, we've just seen how Saquon Barkley's fantasy value or production erupted when he kind of got away from a Daniel Jones offense. So it's not a player I don't like. But at the moment for redraft, he's a top 6 running back. He's running back 9 in Dynasty. And I just can't really get on board with those sort of rankings and values. I think in redraft, I'd sort of be happy to take him as maybe the 10th running back, something like that, maybe top 10, top 12. And in Dynasty, realistically, I'm just not confident with him in my team this year. So I'll probably just be looking to move him on because he's still pretty young. Other people in your league might remember that end of the season and might be happy to pay a fair value for him because of that end of the season. But we've seen it with running backs before, that when they get well into their second contracts, that is when they start to see that drop in production anyway. So if you consider that isn't maybe that's a couple of years away for Jonathan Taylor still. But if we then add in the fact that we don't know what the offense is going to look like, who's going to be the quarterback this year, who's going to be the quarterback next year. So I'll just probably be happy for someone else to have that headache. I think, and like I said, I'm not necessarily saying that it's a sell at all costs, but if someone's kind of remembers Jonathan Taylor of the past, the 2021 season where he scored like 18 touchdowns or 1,800 yards and won leagues for everyone, that's just not going to happen with the Colts the way that they're functioning at the moment. And I'd rather someone else take the gamble that does happen maybe in a year or two's time. See if I can get out where I can and maybe pick up someone valued slightly less and a little piece on board on top of it or something like that. Second unplant for me is Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, so I took Jonathan Taylor in my Scott Fishbowl draft, but I got him at RB10. So I felt pretty good about that, slightly below ADP and somewhere that I was comfortable taking him as my second RB behind Devon Achane, get the tables. But yeah, I'm completely on board. I do like Jonathan Taylor. I think he has the ability. I like players that have the ability to win you a week. So obviously the last couple of weeks of the season, he had the ability to win you, but you had to have him or carry him throughout the season to get there to week 16, 17, the championships before he actually paid off for you. And as you say, this offense, although it has some really good pieces, obviously they've added a really good tight end as well. The quarterback position is obviously a huge concern. Can they sustain drives? What's their defense going to look like? Who's he going to be the quarterback to start the game, to start the season? I have a feeling that we're probably going to see both the quarterbacks this season. In what order, I'm not quite sure. Even seeing today, perhaps it was yesterday, Tyler Warren taking snaps in the backfield, taking handoffs, which is not a complete surprise. But, if you are a Jonathan Taylor owner, you get to the 1 yard line and you see Tyler Warren in the backfield running in the touchdown. You're not going to be too happy about that, and it could be really frustrating. And obviously with the added thought that Anthony Richardson is there as well to siphon away touchdowns. So I think you're right, and I think any sort of running back past the top 5 or 6, once you get past Saquon, perhaps Achan, you then get to sort of Bucky Irving, Jonathan Taylor, Breece Hall sort of territory, and I think anyone from that onwards is, can be labelled a sell for the right price. So if someone's willing to, gamble on what they saw at the end of 2024 with Jonathan Taylor, and they think that he can carry that forward, then perhaps he's a great sell. Someone might give you a couple of first round picks for him. In that case, you snap the hand off for it. So yeah, I think it's a good choice, and I think that it's smart in getting out of these players, maybe a year too early rather than a year too late, because you just see how much, especially running backs, the value decline so dramatically. So yeah, really like that pick. Hopefully it does well this year for me, but after 2025, yeah, not really too bothered about it. So we're going to go to the quarterback position now. Back to me for my unplant, and this is perhaps the most unspectacular first round pick in recent memory. Cam Ward, the Titans. It was one on draft night that not many people were bothered about. It was, so obvious. But that's not the biggest reason that he's the unplant for me for this season. It was with the news that this week they have released the absolute beast that is Treylon Burks. I think he fractured his collarbone or something like that, and he's been released as injured, waived. Yeah, it's quite funny because people have been bringing up the trade where they traded away AJ Brown because they didn't want to pay AJ Brown, who's then subsequently go on to win the Super Bowl with the Eagles, and they just paid him. And it just proves that, you pay your good players. Perhaps the Commanders can take some good lessons out of that one. But yeah, just Cam Ward, I'm just not massively excited about Cam Ward. Looking at his ranking on Keep Trade Cut, which we know a lot of the time that does raise up the younger players ahead of, the likes of. So he's Keep Trade Cut is quarterback 17 right now, which is a bit too high for me. It's above the likes of Trevor Lawrence. Right, I'm not a massive Trevor Lawrence fan, but I'd have him comfortably probably ahead of Cam Ward or thereabouts. He's still ahead of Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. I just think that those two alone are going to finish way ahead of Cam Ward in fantasy production this year. They're sort of early 30s. They've still got plenty of room left to produce in the next few years in good offenses. What should be Cam Ward is the opposite. He's on a really bad sort of offensive team. Not to say that I really dislike Cam Ward, because I have taken him in a couple of rookie drafts where I am rebuilding, and I think he could be a long-term piece. The cost to acquire him right now, I think, is probably sensible. I think you could give a mid first round pick, late first round pick, and probably get him off somebody. Nobody seems to be talking about him. There's just no buzz about the Titans offense at all, or Cam Ward. But when you look into it, he is, sounds like he's making some good plays. He's being, quite comfortable in the pocket, running, using his legs. But I just think that it was a bad rookie class altogether. The consensus quarterback 2 of this class was supposed to be Shedeur Sanders. And you know what happened to him dropping to round 5. I just think that Cam Ward is an okay quarterback. And we talked about ceiling earlier on in the show. And I kind of thought, what do I think is Cam Ward's ceiling? Because I just don't think he can break into be, a solid quarterback 1 for your team. Maybe quarterback 12, like a fringe quarterback 1, if he has, a better than expected season this year. Perhaps in the draft next year, I'd fully expect them with sort of quite an early pick to go maybe a really good wide receiver or offensive line to help him out. So I can see that. But at worst case, I expect this team to struggle. The offensive line is not great. And I think that he could drop to quarterback 20. And I think that perhaps from where he is right now, he's getting close to his ceiling. I think that what we saw as a rookie, in college, He liked to play the hero ball, which looks great in college. Takes an absolute ridiculous time to throw the ball and scramble around. Well, that's not going to work in the NFL, especially behind the Titans' offensive line, which, looking at the stats, was below average last year. So the PFF grade was 60.3 as a whole unit. They were 23rd in pressures allowed. And that was despite having the 8th quickest time to throw from the quarterback. The pressure rate, they were 26th. And even worse, they were 30th in sack rate. So really not great. And they've not done a massive amount to try and beef that up. I think that they could be average at best, but they could, be mid-20s at worst. So not great. And then the weapons that he's got, just absolute terrible. You've got Calvin Ridley, 30-year-old Calvin Ridley, that we're relying on as wide receiver 1. I do think that he could have a half-decent season this year, but behind him, you've got Tyler Lockett coming across, 32-year-old Tyler Lockett that the last couple of years has not shown much juice at all. And then you're just relying on a bunch of rookies. So, I think it could be struggles for Cam Ward, who I don't think is an amazing prospect. And then sort of thinking about what can happen in 12 months' time, you've got a pretty loaded quarterback class that could be coming in. It's not thought that Arch Manning is going to declare until 2027, but you've still got Drew Aller, Nussmeier, Klubnik. You've got Sellers as well. So there's plenty of talent there that could easily push Cam Ward down if they had a good season and, were picked early in the first round. So, not on board with Cam Ward. I have got a couple of shares, but I'm certainly not looking to rely on him for any production in 2025. And this is a guy that I think is going to get a lot of stick in the Wildcard Roast show, because I know that Kev is a hater of Cam Ward, so I can't wait to see what he's got to say about him. But James, what's your feeling about Cam Ward? Are you a bigger fan than what I am?
Just to say, I think Kev's probably got a few pages written down already on Cam Ward on his own, hasn't he, for that roast show?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm either a fan or not a fan of Cam Ward, really. But I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is this isn't a number 1 overall pick that we're expecting to light up fantasy world, and it's not really one that it really isn't very exciting. I would probably mention is I think a lot of the issues with the Titans offense are Will Levis issues or Mason Rudolph issues, and maybe if there is a semi-competent or competent quarterback there, that that offensive line looks a little bit better than it is, and maybe those weapons look a little bit better than they are. And they've obviously got a couple of running backs there that aren't that bad, and what have you. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's kind of the value of it and everything like that, where you just can't be having him valued ahead of a solid, reliable quarterbacks like Dak Prescott and Jared Goff. It just shouldn't happen. Everyone does it because of the age, and these close players are 7 or 8 years older than Cam Ward, but the age is irrelevant if you're not going to be in the league in 7 or 8 years' time, and we just don't know with Cam Ward. So yeah, I can't get on board with that valuation. I am happy to pay, like I said, maybe a late first, mid first for him, on a rebuilding roster where I could see that if he does show that he's competent, his value is going to sort of go up, and I'm going to make value out of that trade. So yeah, I'm not sort of planting my flag, or I'm planting my flag on Cam Ward. I'm kind of staying on the fence, but completely agree with everything you've said and understand your reasons for it.
So here's one for you, James. Who do you prefer in Dynasty between Cam Ward, my unplant, and Mags's unplant, Bryce Young, who obviously had a pretty wild season last year because he was absolutely terrible the first few games, got benched, came back and had some of the most ridiculous stats, like big time throws. He was number 1 or 2 in the NFL. Like the total touchdowns he had was right up there. He was like quarterback 6 at one point. Really wild. Do you think that his good form will sort of return and carry on in 2025, or do you sort of agree more with Mags that you're just unplanting your flag on him, and if you can sell him to a fan, that likes him, then you'd probably do it?
I would take Bryce Young over Cam Ward right now. I'm not going to argue against Mags's selection, but because that end of the season was great for Bryce Young, but I think there was perhaps a few bounces that kind of went their way, and it ended up looking a lot better than it actually was. Like you said, those big time throws, they don't always fall your way. But yeah, they gave a lot of teams headaches towards the end of the season, didn't they? Like really almost beat the Chiefs. Did it come down to like was it a missed field goal or an extra point or something like that, wasn't it? So yeah, that very nearly happened. And I think the reason I would take him over Cam Ward is just because I've seen him play in the NFL, and I've seen that he was able to come back from adversity. I mean, obviously, at one stage last year, it looked like he was never going to play again, or we were never going to consider him as a dynasty asset again. So the fact that he was able to come back and sort of even cement his place as a starter for this year is sort of a success for him in a way, because it didn't look like that was going to happen. And I think with the Panthers, they've obviously, like, they've added Ted McMillan and they've done all these sorts of other things to kind of improve that. Obviously, they got the head coach, Dave Canales, from the previous year, where I maybe have a little bit more faith than I would in Cam Ward. But there's not a lot in it with these two. That you're not really desperate to roster either of them. And you're certainly looking for them to be players that you can rotate in as your QB2 or hopefully your QB3, and you're not looking to rely on them.
Yeah, I agree. I slightly more excited about Bryce Young, just as you mentioned, because we've seen it happen. We've seen that rise from where he was, and be slightly productive for fantasy. And the fact that they did add Ted McMillan, which is a really, really good pick in my opinion. Hate it because they're in the Buccaneers division. I think they will be more pass happy this year. I absolutely love Chuba Hubbard. I think he's going to be an awesome running back again this year with plenty of volume, but I think they'll be more pass happy, and I think that you could see some bigger games from Bryce Young. But I mean, still not really amazing. And yeah, if he's my quarterback 3, I'm really happy about that. If he's my quarterback 2, I'd probably like to shift him on and try and get someone who's got a higher ceiling. Like, as we mentioned, Jared Goff has been a top 6, 7, 8 quarterback the last 2 or 3 years, or thereabouts. Dak Prescott, every time he's been healthy for a full season, has been a quarterback 1. And 3 out of the 6 years that he has been healthy, he's been a top 6 quarterback. So that's the sort of guy that I want to have as my quarterback 2, where then I have the ability to have 2 elite quarterbacks. Bryce Young's just not got that in his arsenal. So I agree with Mags unplanting his flag on Bryce Young as a whole, because of that ceiling for me is not there. But is the ceiling there for another quarterback headed into year 2 that didn't take any snaps in 2024, but certainly got a decent offense ahead of him? So you picked JJ McCarthy as your 3rd unplant.
Yeah, this is another one where, similar to the Cam Ward thing, where it's a what if situation. I think obviously JJ McCarthy's his circumstances are a hell of a lot better than Cam Ward's are, because the Vikings offense is one of the best in the league. The overall roster is one of the best in the league. They've got one of the best play calling head coaches in the league. But I think I haven't actually checked what his ranking is. Keep trade cut, QB 14 keep trade cut, and I think that my kind of issue with it is his value has gone up because he's not injured anymore. He's now healthy. Obviously, it's going to have gone up because he's now the presumed starter. So I understand that, but I think it's just gone a little bit too far and too high for someone that, like you say, has never played a regular season snap. I think there was obviously intentions for him to not play last year anyway. Like, they obviously had Sam Darnold, and they were quite happy to go ahead with that and have JJ McCarthy sort of be the backup and learn behind him. But how much of that can we say he's done while he's been injured? Like, obviously you pick up certain things, but you're not really taking snaps or whatever in practice or that sort of thing. So I just don't know if his value should have sort of bounced back as well as it has. Obviously, it's a great situation. Like, Sam Darnold was a QB1 last year in this situation, and we know what he was like before. I'd just rather see proof of concept before having him valued as a QB 14. I think I could probably name about 20 quarterbacks that I'd rather have. So yeah, I'd have him sort of that range, sort of as a mid QB3. I'd have him around Cam Ward's value. At the moment, he's a few spots ahead of Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward's too high, so I'd drop Ward down a little bit and McCarthy down even more. And again, yeah, I would have Bryce Young above him probably. You've even got Michael Penix who played a few games last year, who I think I would have them around a similar range, which I'm not sure is necessarily the case at the moment. I think he's ranked a few spots behind McCarthy. So yeah, it's one of those where this could go terribly because yeah, if JJ McCarthy is what Sam Darnold was, and he's obviously got a ceiling to be better than what Sam Darnold was, because we've seen what Sam Darnold was like at all of his other spots. So yeah, if he is that good, or if he is better, then I'm going to have egg on my face. This is going to be a terrible pick, but I just, as what I know at the moment, I just can't get on board with it. And yeah, that's just kind of where I am.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a good pick as an unplant. I think that ranking is slightly too high. It's a really interesting case because he's always someone that, when you read about rookie scouting profiles, when you're looking at the tape, when you were scouting him as a prospect, he's someone that you think that he could probably do more, but he was never asked to do more on the way to a national championship. And obviously, we didn't get to see him in year one in that offense. But I do think that offense is a pass-happy offense. I think they're top 6, top 7 the last few years in passing above expectation. Also, there's some stats that show that. But obviously, Darnold was great, had a really good bounce back year, and I think that you could almost insert any quarterback in that situation, and he'll do fairly well. It's just, will he do well enough to pay off a quarterback 14 and be a really high end quarterback 2 when he's probably sitting? I mean, I've not seen Keep Trade Cup for a while, but I imagine he's been sitting around about Kyler Murray. Baker Mayfield's probably sitting around there. And to me, they both represent someone that's got much higher ceilings than JJ McCarthy has.
And we've seen their floor, so we know what the worst we're going to get out of those guys as well.
Exactly. Kyler Murray was probably borderline quarterback 1 last year, and he was pretty terrible, to be honest. It's one of his worst seasons to date, and I expect him to take a jump forward again this year. Baker Mayfield again, what was the top 5 quarterback last year? Fully expect him to be a really solid quarterback 1 this year as well. So yeah, I'd have them over JJ McCarthy, and it is a risk. I think there's a risk. I don't know what the likelihood of him re-injuring, but I do think that at his price, I think that he is definitely approaching his ceiling, if not already hit it. Therefore, that I can't plant my flag on him, and I can't be confident of paying off at that price. So yeah, really, really like that. And then we'll go back to my final pick. And again, this is a similar story. This is a tight end that I think is definitely not even approached his ceiling. He's at his ceiling. Sam Laporta, I think he was the tight end 1 in Dynasty maybe a couple of seasons ago after the back of his really good rookie season. But it, to me, just stinks of like a Kyle Pitts situation where he had an awesome year 1 and we expect that to be the norm. But it's just not quite happened for Sam Laporta for the last couple of seasons. And we've seen the likes of Brock Bowers come in and just look completely different stratosphere to Sam Laporta. And then Trey McBride has obviously taken that next step. And these two are just so far away from the rest of the pack that it's unbelievable. And people are just scrambling to try and get a player that can get close and compete with these two. I just think that Sam Laporta is not that guy, and he's tight end 3 purely based on his rookie season and his age. Pretty much, he's in a decent offense. I guess that helps as well. But you look at Bowers and McBride. I think Bowers was over the 150 targets last year. Trey McBride was close. They're going to get 150, roughly 100 targets per season. Sam Laporta was at 83 last year, and I don't think he struggled with injury. I think that it was just that offense has changed and shaped to, evolve into something else. I think there's only one guy that can sort of compete with Brock Bowers and Trent McBride this year, and he's 31 years old. I think it's George Kittle's the only guy that can compete with them this year and could perhaps even beat them. But when you look at dynasty portfolios, they don't want 30-year-olds on their team. So it's just not sexy to have George Kittle as your tight end one. Despite that, I've got him as my tight end one in so many leagues. I think he's in for a great year. Sam Laporta, when you see him on your team, I think he is that sort of sexy guy where he's young. You're happy about him, set and forget. But you just look at results and the fact that he's the tight end 3, but he's just miles away from Bowers and Trey McBride. He's about as useful as a fart in a hurricane. I absolutely love that saying. But it just is, because he's not useful when you're coming up against Bowers. You see that sort of expected points per game. You just know you're not going to get anywhere near it with Sam Laporta as your tight end 1. You look at the Lions offense, it's gone through a lot of changes this year with the coach and staff leaving, new coaches coming in, and it's sort of changed over the last 3 years. And I mean, especially last year, it sort of run completely through the running game. That great combo of Gibbs and Montgomery, it was hugely successful. Then you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, the crisp route running, always moving the chains, being that target for Jared Goff. It just works. And then you had the breakout season of Jameson Williams. So, he'd struggled the first couple of years, but increased his targets from 42 to 91 last year. I think it was over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. I want to say, might be more than that. But I think that he's going to continue that and, be on pace for that again. So it just doesn't leave a lot of room there for Sam Laporta to have a dominant season like he did in his rookie year. Maybe the new OC coming in boosts him. I think John Morton has come across from Denver. He was there for Bo Nix's rookie season, and he showed that he was really, really efficient with the deep ball. That's not really fitting into the ballpark of Sam Laporta, who needs to be sort of dump offs underneath, moving the stick. So really interesting to see how he sort of fits in the new offense going forward. But as tight end 3, I'm just not having any of that. I'd much rather sell him and move down, to be honest. I've got a big tier below the top 2. So Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, George Kittle, I'd love to get even more shares of him. Even, visiting that next tier of TJ Hawkinson, I think is going to bounce back this year. Tucker Kraft, I've got someone who could break out this year. And David Njoku is someone that I really, really like. So I'd even jump down to that level of tight ends and pick up some really decent capital. So, yeah, it's just sort of the situation, the sort of value that Sam Laporta has. That ranking of tight end 3 is too high for me. He could finish as the tight end 3 and still not be that relevant because he'll be so far behind the top 2. So, yeah, that's sort of the reason why I'm off him this year.
Yeah, I would pick up on just that point that you've said at the end there. Look, he could quite easily be the tight end 3 for this season. He could quite easily be the tight end 3 for the next 3 seasons or 4 seasons or whatever you want to say. But the value difference in terms of what he's bringing to your team from him and the tight end 1 and 2 is going to be so much bigger than the difference between him as tight end 3 and the tight end 12. It's so you may as well, get off of Sam Laporta if you've got him and go out and get one of those tight ends. You said you could even go further down. Like, I'd probably rather have Evan Ingram as my tight end, Sam Laporta. I don't expect that necessarily Evan Ingram is going to score more points than Sam Laporta, but there's such a significant value difference that I'm getting something else for Ingram if I'm making that trade. So yeah, it's going to be worth it. I've never really been a huge Sam Laporta fan anyway. But yeah, like I said, the changes in the offense, there's just extra uncertainty, and it's been trending the wrong way anyway. So yeah, I kind of maybe should have had this as sort of one of my own picks. I think I had the chance to pick him ahead of you. Maybe I should have, but yeah, I'm fully on board with this one, more than any of the others that we've kind of mentioned, I think, so far that you and Max have put forward. I think this is, for me, one of the best picks.
Yep, love to hear it. And we're going to move on to an absolutely terrible pick from Mags to finish it off. But I mean, it wouldn't be right if Mags didn't bring up Kyron Williams for about the 4th year running as his unplant. And one year, James, he's going to be right about this, but I just have a feeling that it's not going to be this year. There's obviously always risk with Kyron Williams, and Sean McVay's offense is, just he could easily throw his running back away and move on to the next one. But, there's talks about an extension with Kyron, and I think it'll probably get done. And he'll continue to have that role as long as he stays healthy. So are you happy if you were rostering Kyron Williams as, if you were a contender, perhaps you're running back 2 maybe on your team? Or are you looking to sell him like Mags is?
I think if he's my running back 2, I'm probably not that worried about it. We mentioned earlier with Jonathan Taylor that it probably is best to always be that year early in selling the player rather than be that year late. So I can sort of understand that. And yeah, obviously this is a for the brand pick from Mags. He had to go this way. Eventually he will be right. He definitely will be right at some point, because eventually this happens with every running back, that there is that drop off. There's always a risk, like you say. They add a new running back every year. Seems to be the thing that Sean McVay does. He has to draft a running back every single season, and eventually he will find one that he prefers. I wouldn't be too worried about it this year. If he's my running back 2, I think I'm fine with it. Who am I going to get that I can sort of see scoring as many touchdowns as he's going to score and get the volume that he's going to have? I certainly wouldn't disagree with Max. He'll be right eventually.
Indeed, I can't wait for that to finally come, and he can cash in on all the years that he's picked him as his Dynasty Unplant. But we're going to move on to the final segment, which is the 2-minute warning, and we've picked the top 5 traded players recently, so the last couple of days, over on dynastydaddy.com, which is their trade finder is magnificent. So with the top 5 traded players this past week has been George Pickens, Kyle Pitts, Breece Hall, Rashee Rice, and Quinshon Judkins. So really interesting list. So I've picked out a trade involving these players, one of each, and we're going to go down and see which side you'd rather be on. So, James, we're going to start off with George Pickens. And the trade is George Pickens and a 26th first, or T. Higgins and a 26th second. Which side of that trade are you on?
Yeah, he's always good, and they're always close. The asset I prefer is T. Higgins. I think the value is fair. We're looking at two wide receivers that are the second wide receiver on their team without a doubt. So there's going to be volatility there. And in that kind of situation, I'm always going to sort of probably lean towards the player that I can sort of see as a bit safer, and I sort of know I can predict sort of how he's going to work out for T. Higgins, because obviously I've seen him in that Bengals offense. We haven't seen George Pickens. The chances are that there's a possibility that he's playing with by far the best quarterback he's ever had. So even though he is the second option on the offense and second best wide receiver, he has one of his best seasons. And in which case, the value is of Pickens' side, but the difference between the first and the second is probably not enough for me to go to Pickens' side. So I'll take Higgins.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a world where George Pickens has a really, really good season. Him and CeeDee Lamb absolutely ball out. And if CeeDee Lamb was to go down, then George Pickens is in for a massive volume. But I'm just going with the chances here. And obviously T. Higgins, we see year in, year out, doesn't last 17 games. But when he is on the field, he's an absolute monster in that offense that, again, the Bengals defense looks like it's going to be pretty useless again this year. So they're going to have to sling it again. And them stacks are going to be paying off for fantasy. So, yeah, I'm going to lean that side as well. And T. Higgins, the known quantity. The next guy that we're going to talk about is Kyle Pitts. And the trade here is Kyle Pitts and a fabled 2027 first, or Colston Loveland and Juwan Jennings from the 49ers.
my question on this one is, who's trading for Kyle Pitts? Why are we doing this again? Like, haven't we been here before? Like, yeah, like the 27 first for Colston Loveland, and then maybe Kyle Pitts and Juwan Jennings. You can sort of value them as equal, but it's just, why would you do this again? Why would you do this to yourself? Yeah, maybe Kyle Pitts, this is the year. But this is that meme that it's never worked for anyone else, but maybe it will work for us. Why would this year be any different? We see this every year with Kyle Pitts. This is his year. Now it's a new quarterback, but he had Kirk Cousins last year. It's just what happens with Kyle Pitts. I wouldn't be trading for him, even if I think the value is on that side. I would find some other way of making that deal. So I would just Colson Loveland and Juwan Jennings.
Yeah, I agree. I'd put that side. The only way that I would go for the Kyle Pitts side is if he wasn't going to be my tight end one. If I had Brock Bowers already and I'm getting a 2027 first, then perhaps I'd lean that side. But straight up, then give me the Loveland side. I think he's already a top 5 dynasty tight end, and I think he's going to be used massively for the Bears. So the third guy is Breece Hall. So this was an interesting one as well. Breece Hall and a 26-second, or previously mentioned Cam Ward. So this is obviously super flex format.
I mean, I'm not. It depends if I'm buying or selling here. I guess I'm not going to sell Cam Ward for Breece Hall and a 26-second. I'm not really. I don't really trade a quarterback in Superflex for a running back. And if I do, it's a running back that I'm really confident in. And I've mentioned this on previous shows that I'm not confident in Breece Hall at all. If I own Cam Ward, I'm not selling him for that. If I'm looking to buy Cam Ward, it's maybe not the kind of deal I'll be looking at either. But I can kind of see it. It is the Cam Ward side for me, just because it's a quarterback, it's Superflex. It's a 26-second, which could end up being nothing, and it's a running back that I'm not really confident in this year or the next couple of years. I'm not sure sort of what happens with Breece Hall in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think Breece Hall could have easily been an unplant for me. I've been pretty vocal about I'm really sort of concerned about Breece Hall's usage this year. Although again, I could have egg on my face because he could easily have a top 5 season, but equally, I think that he could be more in a timeshare this year. So I think it has to be Cam Ward, just because of that insulated value that he's going to have for at least 2 seasons in the NFL at worst. So lean that side. The fourth guy is Rashee Rice. So this is especially for you, James, because it's got a player in it I know you absolutely love. This is Rashee Rice or quarterback Bryce Young, who we mentioned earlier, plus Jalen Noel, who's like the 7th best wide receiver for the Texans.
Yeah, so you're telling me I can get a top 12 wide receiver and Bryce Young? This is Rashee Rice. His value is clear of Bryce Young. Jalen Noel, like you say, there's just too many other options in that Texans offense. Like, as much as I love him, he could be nothing in a year's time. He might not ever make the field, that kind of thing. Like, there's just too many people in front of him, and it might just not work out for him. So I'm not going to give up the highest value player in the trade and have Jalen Noel be the one that bridges the gap, because he's effectively a 3rd round pick, maybe a late 2nd. So if you take the player name out of it and you tell me this is a late 2nd or an early 3rd, then that's never bridging that gap for me. So even though it's a player I love, it's just not going to do enough. So Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I agree. It kind of feels like this was the Rashee Rice owner that's just bailed for safety and thought he'll go with a young quarterback plus a young wide receiver that can ascend. So, but I think it's Rashee Rice for me. I absolutely love him as an asset, despite what's going on off the field. And again, another player that has got off the field issues in Quinshon Judkins. Do you prefer Quinshon Judkins or DJ Moore as a trade that happened in the last couple of days?
Yeah, this is another one where I'm questioning why you're trading for Quinton Judkins right now. I mean, we won't go into too much detail about what he done. Obviously, it's not a good look, and it's not the kind of player that you want to be rostering on your fantasy team. If you want to detach yourself from that and look at the value of it, but you have to consider he's not even signed for his team yet. You know, he's not even an NFL player yet because he hasn't signed his contract because of this is all going on. So yeah, I just wouldn't be trading for him. I think I would take the DJ Moore side here anyway. But yeah, right now, if someone offered me DJ Moore for a share of Quinton Judkins, I'm more than happy to take that because I can probably move even if I don't like DJ Moore, I could probably move him to someone that I am happy to have. That yeah, maybe someone else doesn't value quite as highly or whatever. If it means I can get off of someone who I don't know if he's ever going to play in the NFL. For someone that holds decent value like DJ Moore does, then I'm more than happy to do that right now. I have got some Quinton Judkins shares, and I haven't sent out any offers. I don't want to sort of profit from the situation or anything like that. So I wouldn't be making a trade really, but I would take DJ Moore if I had to.
Yeah, I think this is a close one for me because I have been and still am high on Quinton Judkins, and it was big disappointment to hear what came out was it a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, it is a shame, and I just think this comes down to whether you're risk adverse, whether you like to take a risk, whether you really go for wide receiver over running back, the safety of a sort of a wide receiver two in DJ Moore, or perhaps a running back that can be a running back one in Dynasty, but has some situations going on right now. It's very, very close for me. I'm not even going to pick a side because DJ Moore's absolutely solid, and Quinton Judkins is the complete opposite. But I thought it was just a really, really interesting trade to outline. So yeah, with that brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow and subscribe on X and at YouTube at Fantasy Wildcard and Wildcard Dynasty, and follow the Wildcard Devy boys who are putting out some really, really good content lately as well. So yeah, thank you again. We will hopefully see you again next week, and I'm sure Mags will be with us very, very shortly. So thank you once again. And remember, when you have the wild card, you have the power to change the game.